are live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir.
Blake, I know we were excited last week when we had the Week 0 slate, but now we have a full damn lineup. We get to talk about some real games. You know, we're not talking about an FCS on FBS matchup. We talked about Georgia and Clemson, but dude, this is going to be an awesome Week 1 slate that we have.
Very good slate. We'll talk about three key games today. Miami versus Florida, Notre Dame versus Texas A&M, LSU versus USC. All games, Joe, early in the season. I can't believe I'm going to say this, but already start framing the work of what could be the new expanded playoff.
I think what's going to be really funny for today, I don't know about what your opinions are going to be on these games, but we had a lot of wide ranges of opinions in the sense that like we were kind of going to the extremes for our predictions for how we talked about them. I'm going to be pretty down the middle. I think all of these games are going to be close. Like none of these games are going to be more than a touchdown at most.
Oh, I'm probably in the same boat as you then.
Yeah.
Other than I do think that either LSU or USC could win by double digits.
That's the only one that I push back on that. I think that if Florida is as much of a sitting duck as everybody thinks that they are, that one could get messy.
As good as we think that they are, yeah, they could blow them out. But
I don't think that's happening though.
Well, let me ask you this: what does your boy say every time we talk about Florida and they have a game at home?
Well, but that's why I'm reserving judgment that even if Miami is as good as we think that they are, this is a really important game for them to build momentum. They don't need to win by freaking 20 points to prove that they're an ACC champion. If they win this thing by a touchdown or a little bit less, that is an extreme accomplishment for what you have said a million times on the show. I will never go against that anymore. I will never pick a blowout for a game when Florida's hosting it.
Same could be said for Kyle Field. Now, the only difference is that you have much different scenarios and situations with A&M and Notre Dame. Joe, the line moved today on Notre Dame, so it was 2.5.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, now it's 3 on Bet Online. So, look, there is a lot of money coming in on A&M. I don't know. I'm going to be real with you. I don't know what to make of that because there are people out there when it comes to betting that are very much more smarter than I am, right? And so I question why that line is moving. Now, I will say this. Look, I think this is Notre Dame's toughest game potentially on their schedule because of where they're going, not necessarily who they're playing. So I look even at that game and say to myself, like, look, man, I don't know how I feel about either team because here's the truth. I have no idea what to expect out of A&M other than I think they'll play some really good defense.
Well, and to that as well, that doesn't bode well for Notre Dame. This is a very ambiguous situation. There is zero clarity on what to expect from this team. This could go in a million different directions. Their secondary could be a complete mess. Their defense could be completely overwhelming. Connor Weigman could have a career day and completely smoke them, or they could have trouble moving the ball because it's a first game in a new system and a new team. This is probably one of the hardest games to predict. And I know that during the offseason I talked a lot of crap, just to talk a lot of crap because I like doing that. But to actually preview the game and remove my fan bias as much as I want Notre Dame to win by 100 points, I don't think that that's going to happen just because of just how much uncertainty comes into this for Texas A&M.
LSU in Vegas. LSU and UNC in Vegas. Joe, did you see both teams had their logos on the sphere in Vegas? I thought that was really cool. Really, really, really cool.
Yeah.
The thing about that is both of them have the same question marks. LSU and USC all have the same question marks. What do you do with that receiver? What do you do at quarterback with a Heisman guy going in the top 2 picks? What do you do defensively? You fired your entire defensive staff. Basically, I do think that one comes down to coaching staff. Who has the better staff? Who has the – and I think at the end of it, I'm – little spoiler alert for people who watch AYS on Thursdays. Whoever's staff is the best is going to win this football game, in my humble opinion. So I think we'll find out a lot about USC and LSU in Vegas. But here's an ultimate question, Joe. Let's just say hypothetically LSU wins. You set up for October 12th with two undefeated teams, potentially in Ole Miss and LSU. That will be a big-time playoff contending matchup. USC going into another conference, Joe, if they win, what are we really saying? And I will say this about USC. I'm going to talk about this tonight at 7 a lot. Joe, the more and more that I've watched them over this last weekend, because we do our film breakdowns and talk about them on Mondays when we're in game week, the more and more I watch USC, Joe, they were elite at times offensively. Brother, they are elite. Not good, not great, elite on special teams. They were number one in the country in block punts, number one in the country in field goals, and in extra points.
Which is kind of like it's such a random stat to be factored in a way.
Can I tell you something? Okay. I don't know how much USC's problems defensively wasn't scheme versus personnel. I really, really don't. Because, Joe, they got athletes all over the place, and I think that will present LSU a really big challenge.
I don't disagree with that, and it's the same case for LSU where there were a lot of guys that were misused and misschemed. There are defensive linemen that USC had that were talented but felt like they weren't properly coached up. Bear Alexander is Exhibit A. But at the same time, their issues are a lot less fixable in one off season than LSU's were. Like LSU's is just it's more scheme, it's more attention to detail, it's your defensive line firing off the ball more aggressively, all of those things. But for USC, they weren't tackling. They just straight up were not tackling. And I wonder if that's something that can be ready and cemented and resolved and more of a focal point in week one. That might be something that takes a few weeks and into the season for them to feel a little bit more confident in.
Year 3, Lincoln Riley. Year 3, Brian Kelly. Which one is going to prevail? We'll talk about that here tonight as well. Joe, I gotta say something before we get rolling here. We are not taking live phone calls tonight, and neither is Dabo Sweeney. So Jesus never took live phone calls when he was at the when he was doing his sermon. So I don't think we.
What about staged? What about staged phone calls? Is that on the docket
LSU
for Dabo?
Did that after Orgeron got called, and people were talking about blondes and big titties and things like that. But listen, here's the truth.
Tyler from Spartanburg was a plant, and everybody freaking knows it.
Well, here's the thing. I don't mind that. If a lot of people laughed at that, I'm going to be real with you. Whatever's going to motivate your team to win. By the way, they won 7 of their last 8 games. I'm just going to throw that, or 6 of their last 7 games, whichever one.
That's why I think it was fake, because he's corny, and it would be a corny thing to do to have a GA call in.
I think it's fake. Can I tell you? Because you know that if any man, Tyler from Spartanburg, that man would have been all over Twitter saying, here I am, how do you do?
Yes.
That's why it's fake. But I don't care about that. If Dabo uses that to get his players up.
Yeah. I don't think it's a bad tactic. It definitely was.
Now I'm going to say this. Did you listen to Kirby's press conference?
No, I didn't catch that today. No. What did he say?
He is not brother is worried a little bit about his interior defensive line.
Yeah, but how many times did Nick not come up in those preseason press conferences?
No, go watch it. You'll know what I'm talking about.
I don't know. Good coaches, I think, just hold their team to a higher standard.
Joe, they got 3 injuries, and their backup running back just had surgery. The man is like sweating. Their brother was sweating on the pool at the press conference.
I guess we'll see.
I mean, watch him blow him out by 15 or something.
Yeah.
All right. Let's get moving. Everybody do us a favor by hitting the like and share. Share to all those groups. If you're on Facebook, share to all of those social media pages. You're watching us, listening to us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, notification bell, wherever you listen to podcasts. Rate, review, and subscribe. Joe, did you see my man Chris Gates today post?
Oh, my God. He's
photos. My man's online fitness program is insane. Why don't you go ahead and talk about it?
Yeah, if you need proof of how good a shape Chris is in, who's been sponsoring the show for this past month, go check out him on Twitter. There's no joke. It's absolutely no joke. And if you want the same results, you can get them by checking out Chris Gates's online fitness training camp. Training camp is an online fitness community designed specifically for sports fans to help you get the results with your health and fitness without cutting out everything that you love, like drinking beer and tailgating for football games in the fall. I know that's something that I've always struggled with. It's something that's made sustaining and going after your goals so much harder, is not being able to enjoy yourself on the weekends, especially when football's on. In training camp, you'll get all the support that you need to build muscle, burn fat, and stay consistent with your workouts. And at the same time, you'll instantly join a community of like-minded people doing the same thing. Visit chrisgatesfitness.com/training camp or click the link in the description to learn more and sign up today. Use code RufinoJoe and get a discount on your first month.
Let's talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. We come back and talk about Miami, Florida next. Stay with us. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. All right. Let's get this thing rolling. By the way, I'm just going to throw this out there very, 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 very quickly. ESPN leaked their commercial from Miami and Florida that's supposed to be airing tomorrow. And let me just say this. I almost punched somebody. I was so fired up. By the way, I listened to like 4 press conferences today from other coaches. I wanted to run through a wall, dude. Like, football is here. Football is back. And it's going to be really exciting. Joe, one of the biggest games of week 1 is going to be the Miami Hurricanes versus the Florida Gators in the Swamp. A lot has been made of Miami this season, mainly due to the fact that a lot of people have put them in their playoff predictions. They get a guy like Cam Ward in. They have a very underrated wide receiver core with Restrepo and George. They bring in guys like Damian Martinez, Ruben Baines along that defensive line, and you add a really good Big Ten defensive tackle in Simeon Barrow. When you look at this game, my friend, in week 1, how do you see Miami and Florida playing out?
First of all, one thing that I'm really focusing on, and I think what is going to be super important for the outcome of this, is specifically how quickly does Cam Ward hit the ground running? How quickly does he gel with the offense? How quickly is he able to generate splash plays and connect with his receivers? Because we just watched, understandably, a much weaker quarterback in DJU. We just watched a transfer quarterback in a new situation struggle mightily in his first game with his new team. I don't think that Cam Ward is going to have the same types of issues that DJU did, because DJU's struggles were a lack of aggressiveness and willingness.
Is who he is, though.
Yeah, a lack of a willingness to take risks, and Cam Ward is the polar opposite of this. If he doesn't turn the ball over and he has a clean game and he connects on a couple of deep balls, that is going to be really big for Miami's production. The other part of this, though, that I think is really important to know, Florida's offensive line is better than I think people realize. I think, again, Florida has just been dropped down as this weak team that's going to get completely knocked over by whoever they play. Their O-line, Austin Barber, it's a pretty good group. And there's 3 new starters for Miami's defensive line. So they need to come firing off the ball as to not allow to happen to them what Florida State had go down for them with new faces on their defensive line against Georgia Tech.
I think you hit the nail on the hammer when you said, how quickly does Cam Ward gel with his new team? And I think we got a really interesting example of that in week 0 with DJU. Here's the question that I would possess to most people. Has Cam Ward played in an environment like this in week 1 with a brand new football team?
Great point.
Okay.
Great point.
And we're talking about turnovers, and we're talking about them gelling early. The issue with that is, Joe, what if they come out and just run the ball with Damian Martinez with a really good offensive line and are able to open some things up with Cam Ward? Mm-hmm. So it's not like that they don't have options, but it is going to be a very interesting chess match when it comes to Florida because of how loud that stadium is going to be in a rivalry game in week 1 with a brand new team. Now, that's not to say that they can't come out firing off on all cylinders. A lot of us think that they're going to be a very talented team. But I want to look at the other side of the offense, or the other side of the ball when it comes to Graham Mertz and Florida. Joe, what if he progresses? Because here's the thing that I kept thinking about in this game too. We all thought going into the season last year that he might be one of the worst quarterbacks in the SEC. That's how people projected him.
That wasn't true, yeah.
And that wasn't true. What happened was my man threw 25 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He was highly accurate. Now, he was dumping the ball off, and I'm not saying he wasn't taking deep shots. Joe, what if he comes out in this game and finds Eugene Wilson, Trey Wilson, and they're able to hit on some big shots with the running game that we know that they can possess? I think that this game is going to be so much closer than people are giving it credit for, mainly due to where it's being played. And I do think that Billy and this offensive staff does not get the credit that they deserve on the leap that Graham Mertz took a year ago. Joe, what if he does take a bigger leap in a second year of an offense? You also really well illustrated about Florida. We look at Florida and say, oh man, they're going to be 5-7. Well, we're saying that because we're logo watching and saying, man, they have an insane
schedule.
They have an insane schedule. Okay, well, are you 1,000% sure you're going to pick Florida State over Florida when we get there? I don't know. I don't know anymore.
It's true.
So now we already have a game out of the way. I legitimately look at Florida and say, what does Billy do that could give Miami problems? He loves holding on to the football. Joe, they were top 10 units back-to-back years in time of possession. Mm-hmm. They want to hold on and run the football. Take small throws, get first downs, be progressive and methodical down the field. However, I just don't know if they have enough to overcome when the game gets late. I just think that there's way too much talent on Miami right now, and I still don't. I get what people say about Mario and, hey, Cristobal, he has some very bad lapses. I get that. I understand that. But the talent that they possess on both lines of scrimmage, Joe, is where I can't give the edge to Florida because of how good Miami is on both sides. Now, the thing that I think is really interesting in this game, Montrell Wilson has been a little nicked up with injuries.
Montrell Johnson,
excuse me.
Yep.
Montrell Johnson has been a little nicked up with injuries.
He had a knee procedure, so I don't know if he's even available. There's been no update on that.
Correct. Joe, against a really good defensive line. So that makes me a little skittish when I look at Florida. But, man, you know that I love this analogy, and I'm going to use it again here. Billy Napier came out today, and it was one of the press conferences that I watched. They are the pit bull that's in the corner. Everybody has been poo-pooing on them all offseason, right? They're going to go 5-7. Billy Napier's on the hot seat. Joe, what if they come out and show that they've actually got a process and that it's working? I think Miami is going to win this game, but, Joe, I can't give them more than a field goal. I really can't, because here's another thing, too. I've seen them play in that stadium against really good opponents with Billy Napier, and that game's a lot closer than people want to let on. I just think that the talent in the late in the third quarter and into the fourth, the talent that Miami possesses is going to overwhelm them, and that's why they're going to come out with a win.
The line right now is set at 2.5 for Miami. I think that Miami covers. I think that they
would be a 3.5, would be a 6.5 if it were a neutral site, just for people that get that right.
I think that they're going to win by more than a touchdown. I'm not of the belief or at all going to be in the camp that this game ends up being super lopsided for where it's being played, for it being a rivalry. I mean, I remember the last time that these two teams played, I want to say that was 2019, unless I'm misremembering. This game can get pretty crazy when they face off with one another. But it's been brought up in our comments too, that we talked about with Florida State, and then people have been saying that, like, well, why are you guys so high on Miami, who's also like a portal-heavy team? I think that there's just a difference in the types of guys that were brought in.
Yeah, it's called quarterback.
Yeah, at quarterback, that they're just so much more explosive. Everything that you talk about Billy Napier is true. I think that they're going to want to come into this game trying to prove that they don't deserve the criticism that they've been getting. But at the same time, Mario Cristobal needs this game as a momentum builder. Like, he really needs this game to help them hit the
Cristobal or Napier.
Cristobal Napier needs it so he doesn't get fired. Mario Cristobal needs it so that he can get everybody to shut up and stop doubting him for being a bad in-game coach. I think that Cristobal is going to have his guys motivated and ready to go. I look at the way that they played against Texas A&M last year maybe as a good example, where going up against, and that was at home, but going up against a team with a coach on the hot seat, no one's expecting you to win. Everyone's thinking you're going to get trounced, and coming out firing on all cylinders, being nearly perfect on offense and putting a ton of points up on the board. That was an infamous game for us because I predicted it so poorly. I really think that Cam Ward, though, is going to get into a rhythm in the second half, and they're going to win this game by about a touchdown, maybe a little bit more.
I think the biggest mismatch in this game is the wide receiver unit at Miami versus the DB room at Florida.
Yep.
People forget about Jacoby George. They forget about Estrepo when we talk about because of Cam Ward and Damian Martinez.
Sam Brown, too. Sam Brown's the best of the three of them. He's the best receiver of all three of them. No, I'm telling you right now, he's going to put up the most production. I broke down his film. That kid is a potential first rounder. I
can't go there.
Unbelievably good. I was in love with him.
Had 1,000 yards with Tyler Van Dyke as his quarterback.
Jacoby George is a great player. I'm not down that, but okay. Sam Brown had Donovan Smith, who was airmailing him passes like every other throw that was coming his way. So
I think that is the biggest mismatch. Now let me reverse the roles and ask you. Does Florida have a mismatch that big in this game? Because I don't think there's one. And no. I'm going to tell you this, too. You know what really worries me in this game? We're talking a lot about Cam Ward. Cam Ward actually worries me in this game because I don't know what I'm going to get. And let me say this, too, Joe. Cam Ward turned the football over a lot. All right? I mean, 8 turnovers, 5 fumbles. That's a lot. That's a turnover a game. All right? And when you do that in critical situations – momentum in games like this is a massive deal, very massive deal. So, look, we've seen transfer portal quarterbacks come in, like Jalen Hurts is the obvious one that can come in year one and lead a team to a playoff. I just don't know how I feel about this one. Now, I'm going to pick Miami. I'm with you. I think it's within a 3 to 7 point game here. But let me ask you this. If that game is close and Miami is the team that we think that we are, is Florida going to go 8-4? Joe, if it's a 3-point loss to Miami and we're projecting them to win the ACC, now what?
Man, that schedule is so hard, though. Like for them to be
upset somebody. Like, let me give an example.
I was the one who even said this in the Florida preview that we did. I even said that they could upset teams that nobody's thinking that they can beat.
LSU, Texas, Florida State. I mean, there are legitimate. It's just very legitimate that they could do it. So,
I don't. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to jump right in and say though that if they keep this game close, that's an indicator that they could go 8-4 because they could totally lay an egg.
I think it builds momentum for them.
It does, but they could also totally go on to lay multiple eggs on the rest of their schedule and get overwhelmed. I mean, great example is that they knocked Tennessee around and they beat them pretty handedly. And Tennessee was a ranked team for most of last year.
Tennessee.
That's not the point. The point is the point is though is that wasn't enough of a momentum builder for them. They still ended up struggling in a lot of their other games. I mean, the LSU game was embarrassing how badly they got smoked by them.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels. Oh, Jesus
Yeah.
Christ. He just ran in for another touchdown.
Right.
All right, so we'll see. You want to move on to Notre Dame and A&M here?
Yep.
Joe, Notre Dame comes down south to the great state of Texas and takes on the Aggies, a Jimbo-less Aggies, is pretty much that's been the entire conversation this entire offseason. You want to hear something funny because you know how big of a narcissist I can be at times? People, at least that's what people tell me. Do you want to know how many bullet points that I have in this Notre Dame Texas A&M game? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 10 bullet points going.
You better not read all 10 of those. You better absolutely not.
But I'm going to kick it off to you first because I'm sure you're going to hit on a lot of them. Your thoughts on Notre Dame going down south and taking on Texas A&M?
So first of all, as I said in the open, I think that there's a lot of uncertainty for knowing how good Texas A&M is going to be in this game. If it plays out as anyone would anticipate, first game for a new head coach, there's going to be growing pains. It's going to be a little bit of a slow getting to know them type of a process. Your first game is not going to be your best performance. That could end up biting them in the ass in this situation. They are favored by 3 points, but if this was on a neutral field, that line would look differently because of the home field.
No, it's basically a pick'em.
Right. It's basically a pick'em. I don't think that it should be. I think that what's really going to be critical is the battle between Notre Dame's offensive line and Texas A&M's defensive line. Anthony Knapp is projected to start at left tackle for Notre Dame. He is a true freshman. That is very serious because I have hyped up Nick Scourton to be one of the most unbelievably talented players in the country. He's going to go on to be a top 5 pick potentially in this upcoming draft. I'm less worried, though, than I think you would expect, and I don't think Notre Dame fans should be totally worried, and here's why. Last year, we had perfect examples of how Mike Denbrock knows how to scheme protection, and the ball gets out really quick in his offense. If that offense looks similar, and there's not any drastic changes, which I doubt that there will be, I think that there is going to be an emphasis on trying to get the ball out quickly to prevent any situations where he's facing pressure. That was one, Riley Leonard's facing pressure. That was one of their biggest issues last year, was that Sam Hartman would sit, no one would get open, hold the ball too long. He's not very mobile, and then he would take a hit, he would take a sack, he would turn the ball over. That's not going to happen with Riley Leonard. And then the other part of this too, the last thing for me, is can Notre Dame's secondary turn over Connor Weigman, and can they lock down Texas A&M's receivers? I think that they have an underrated receiver room, but there is a potential that secondary for Notre Dame is going to be able to generate some pass breakups and then maybe an interception that could sway the game in their direction.
I'm going to push back on one itsy-bitsy thing.
Okay.
Denbrock can get in a rhythm where he's not getting the ball out quickly. If you don't believe me, just ask Jaden Daniels. So, but the situation changes because of the offensive line. Joe, I do feel like that there's going to be a little bit of a filling out process early in this game, right? Like I think that there's going to be, punches thrown back and forth because I do think that they're going to come out there a little bit conservative, meaning Notre Dame to start off, try to run the football, establish the run. Because, look, you do have an offensive line that not only is brand new, but you have Jagasol that went down at left tackle, and you have a really good Texas A&M defensive line. Look, man, Nick Scourton, the Shamar twins, which is what I'm going to call them, and Turner and Stewart. Okay, Joe, that's a really good defensive front. Here's the thing that I think is interesting about Notre Dame's offense versus A&M's defense. You have 3 new starters in that secondary if you're Texas A&M. You have Des Ricks, you have Will Lee, and you have Trey Jones that are all new portal guys that are coming in that secondary. How cohesive can those 3 guys be necessarily when they come in and play one another? But I want to throw it to the other side of things that I think is actually going to be a bigger tell in this game too. I don't know if A&M can stop the interior defensive line of Notre Dame with Howard Cross. Yep. So I think you have 2 defenses that have a lot of talent. That, Joe, early in this game, it could be a slugfest, and I think it's going to be an outright war on both lines of scrimmage. The question that I start asking is, Joe, if they start to get Riley Leonard in the running game, then how does that affect things? Another question I have, though, is do you protect him because he was injured and you don't, like you want to protect him too to some extent?
Yeah, you can't come into this game though with that mentality. If he's enough healthy, he's got plenty of time to recover after this game. I know that's a weird mentality.
He had a setback. So, I mean, like those are questions that all offensive coordinators are going to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Joe, what's so wild to me is that this game is pretty much a pick'em, and it really on paper shouldn't. I thought that the point that you made to end your part of what you thought of the game was very key. Connor Weigman has never seen a defense like this, and we haven't seen Connor Weigman for what it's worth. And let me say this too. I think Connor Weigman is very talented. Can we see him play it through a whole year before we anoint him as a really good quarterback? Look, he went into that Miami.
Fair point.
We went into that Miami game, and he had multiple turnovers, and they lost. Like, he had very critical turnovers against a Miami team last year that also wasn't really good. Joe, you just have so many things that you're having to figure out if you're Texas A&M and having to replace that I think at the end of it, when it's the fourth quarter, I think Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman, it being a third year, they may figure it out and lean on their defense. It's not missed upon me, though. There's a lot of things that Notre Dame's got to figure out offensively, too. Your 1,300-yard rusher and Audric Estime is not there anymore. You have a brand-new quarterback who did not go through spring. Joe, I think we're going to have a game midway into the fourth quarter, and I think the only thing that I feel like here is that Notre Dame just makes the last stop, and that's what prevails them to win. But, man, here's the final point that I'll say, and I know that you're going to laugh at me on this. You cannot be in a slugfest with Texas A&M in the fourth quarter at that place when shit gets rocking. Do you remember Rocky II? Do you remember the movie Rocky II?
Yes.
All right. So remember in the final round when Apollo Creed's trainer was like, stop trading punches with him. You're going to lose. Stop trading punches with him. You're going to win the fight. Stay away. Go through your game plan. That's how I feel like Notre Dame has to go amongst this. Go to your game plan. Lean on your talent. Lean on your philosophy. You'll win this football game. But if you go in there trying to slug this one out in that home stadium, you're going to find yourself getting upset. So I'm just going to throw this out there. Do not underestimate the outright weird stuff that when those male cheerleaders, Joe, come out there, woo, shit gets weird. I'm telling you. But that's how I feel like this game's going to go. It's going to be so close in a slugfest between two really talented teams.
Well,
that
was really, really beautiful what you just did. I think, though, that what's different this year for Notre Dame, though, is, you brought in a far more competent play caller than you've had in a long time. This is the best play caller that you could have for this upcoming first game of the season. I really think that we're going to see a night and day different offense for Notre Dame. I think that the just general explosiveness is going to be witnessed, and a lot of doubters, I think, are going to be silenced. Maybe I'm putting too much stock in Denbrock, but there's a lot of speed, man. There is a lot more speed than people realize. Jeremiah Love is very fast. This receiver room, I saw some 40-yard dash times for these guys. Most of them are in the 4.4s or lower. There is a very fast group, and Mike Denbrock knows how to use those types of receivers.
The only thing that I'll say with Mike, and I love him. Look, I love Mike more than a lot of people. Mike will tell you in early seasons with new quarterbacks, they're going to come out running the football. So they might have better weapons on the outside than they have had in the past. I'm not trying to spoil anything here, brother. It would not surprise me if Mike came out, meaning Denbrock, anyway. It wouldn't surprise me if he does some little trickery in the beginning of the game.
Yeah, he should.
However, Joe, did you see him going up against this A&M defense? Like the last game that he's called was against A&M. Now, I know it's a completely different staff. I know it's a completely different situation. Joe, he kind of got out schemed a little in the first half, right? And I love Mike.
Well, wait, but
he got out schemed.
Yeah, but who was they were going against Texas A&M. It was like a different coaching staff, though. Like, I don't know if that's a good example.
I understand that, but I'm just saying, I love Mike to death, but sometimes he gets a little stubborn in what he wants to do.
Well, great. I want to bring this up too.
Okay.
One thing we didn't talk about at all in the Texas A&M preview, Jay Bateman as the defensive coordinator hire for Texas A&M, I don't think got enough criticism, especially from us. I think he's an okay defensive coordinator. It felt like a completely just like tertiary decision.
You know who's calling that defense. You know who's calling that defense. Don't.
Do we know that for certain? Do we know that Elko's calling that defense?
Joe.
I'm not going to say that with such certainty when that hasn't been clarified.
It's not missed upon me that Mike Elko's DC went to Georgia Tech and put on a performance like they did this week. That's not missed on me now.
Yeah, I wonder why he didn't come to Texas A&M. I don't know.
Elko's calling plays, man. He's going to be very involved.
Has that been reported anywhere?
Joe, you're looking at this as a fan. You know good and
I'm not looking at this as a fan. I'm looking at this as as someone who's analyzing this game. It has not been reported, okay. So I don't know who is calling the defensive plays.
Honest question: do you really think that Mike Elko, at the bare minimum, is not going to be more hands-on defensively?
Was he calling the plays at Duke? I don't know off the top of my head. Was he calling plays at
play sheet?
I don't know if that we can say that with such certainty that he calls the plays for Texas A&M. I don't know about that. But they're going to need Elko to call the plays, though, because again, I don't think that Jay Bateman's a very, very good defensive coordinator. He was very mediocre calling the plays for North Carolina a couple of years ago.
I think you're reading way too much into that.
That's important. That's incredibly important.
No, because here's what Joe.
Give me Mike Denbrock over Jay Bateman in that matchup.
Yeah, very, very fair. But here's what I know about Mike Denbrock. He will tell you right now. Do you want his phone number? I'll send it to you. He will tell you that Mike Elko, because of the connections that they have with the coaching staffs that they've been on, there's nobody that he respects more than Elko. Nobody.
Yeah. I also to that point to kind of shift the direction of this a little bit. It is also to Texas A&M's benefit significantly Elko's familiarity with Riley Leonard. I think Riley Leonard, having gone up against his scheme in practice every day, is going to help him a little bit. But a guy in his 50s who recruited the kid is going to know how to work against him much more effectively than the quarterback is in that dynamic.
Yeah. I think that he can, because he'll know what Riley does and doesn't like.
Yeah. He's gonna know what leads to his mistakes. He's gonna know what coverages are gonna cause him to get confused. Yeah.
Right. Look, here's another thing let's lean in on this quarterback thing.
Mm-hmm.
I like Riley Leonard. I think that he is a very talented and very gifted athlete, and he can do some amazing things with the football in his hand. However, Joe, I do think if I'm Elko, I'm coming out trying to make you one-dimensional. I think Elko needs to come out there and make Riley Leonard beat them with his throwing the football. Like, you got to come out and sell out and stopping the run.
Okay, I'm going to sit here and tell you right now, that's not going to work, because when Notre Dame played Riley Leonard and they tried to literally do that, Riley Leonard said, okay, bet, I'm just going to beat you with my legs. That's what Haynes King just did the other day. I don't know. I think that he's a different type of athlete. And
you came in the injury and said Haynes King didn't do anything special with running for 50 yards, and you're going to say
no. Hold on. Do not misquote me like that. I said as a passer, he didn't have any like super crazy take over the game type plays, but as a runner, he was fantastic.
20-yard ball that led to a score. Yeah, he did.
I'm talking about as a passer. He misfired on a number of throws, but we're not.
He fired a pass over the middle that converted, and they scored on that drive too.
That's one throw. He also threw a million screens and short passes and then missed through a number of wide open guys that
Are you
could have
talking
been
about
huge plays.
DJU or are you talking about Haynes King?
I'm talking about Haynes King. He had a great game, but as a passer, he was a little bit average.
Passes. He was 11 of 16.
He was 11. He threw 16 passes. That's not that. That's
70%.
That's 16 passes is minuscule for the typical amount of production 70%. That we see.
It's still 70%. Can I say this and you're going to get pissed off, but I'm going to be honest.
Probably.
Okay. I think there's a little bit too much of people not like really looking into a play caller and a quarterback in a game one type of situation. Joe, this is not a Notre Dame thing. This is a football thing. There have been many, and I mean many quarterbacks and coaches, when they come together for the first time in a real game, there are struggles in the beginning, in game ones.
Boy, can't the same thing be said for Texas A&M, though?
Very much true. That's why I try to ask you about the quarterback thing. The only difference that I would say with Weigman is Weigman's been with his offensive line and his receivers. So the connection is still there. There's not going to be a misconnection when it comes to him not knowing his receivers. Now, here's another part, too, that we hadn't talked about. Reuben Owens is not going to be in this game, and I fear for A&M running the football, if I'm being honest. I really think that interior defensive line of Notre Dame is going to kill them.
They seem that right now that they might end up being a little thin at running back. I think Le'Veon Moss was listed as the current starter. They also have Emmitt Smith's son is the third back, so that's kind of where their depth leads. But yeah, if you pull up their depth chart on our lads, they've got three new guys that were transfers that are just completely new faces. Their center. Oh no, two new guys. Their center and their right tackle are new players. Chase Pasantis is a good guard that they have. I think though that yes, that is very true. That's where I feel that Notre Dame has the best matchup to win this game. If I'm comparing whose offensive line is most favored or whose defensive line is most favored best to win the matchup against the opposing offensive line, I think Notre Dame's in the run game is the most favored.
I'll push back on one thing. I'm going to disagree with you here. Notre Dame's going to have to prove that they can stop that pass rush.
Yeah, and that's easier said than done.
And Absolutely. That's easier said than done. Listen now, we've gone about 15 minutes maybe in this segment. I don't know how long we've been in this segment, and we hadn't
18.
talked about Nick Scourton. Okay? Now, here's the thing now. We keep talking about Riley Leonard and miscues and all this kind of stuff. What takes away the running game more than anything is unrivaling pressure that gets on the quarterback. This Jigsaw thing is a big deal. Like it keeps Jagasaw, excuse me.
Sorry.
Jagasaw, Hagasaw, it doesn't, who gives a saw? It could lead to Joe, we're projecting him as the best edge rusher in the SEC against a first-time starter that you did not want to go into the season as your left tackle. That's going to present problems.
It's going to present problems, and I think that is going to be an extremely critical matchup in this game is how does Knapp hold up against him? Again, I'm not saying this as if I think it's going to be completely resolved and won't be an issue for Notre Dame, but I do have like a little bit of faith that Denbrock is smart enough, unlike past offensive coordinators, the past two guys that Notre Dame has had, in trying to scheme against pressure and good pass rushers.
What does he call if his tackles are bad?
I think that they're going to need to rely on a lot of chips. I don't think that both tackles are going to be bad. And I don't think that Anthony Knapp is going to be bad. He's just a true freshman, which is brutal situation to step into.
So what do you call when your offensive line is going?
I am chipping with the tight end as much as possible, and I am deliberately calling as many passing plays to get the ball out as quickly as possible. I am trying to avoid as many third and longs as I can. That has to be the approach. And look, Riley Leonard probably doesn't have the same type of deep ball that Jaden Daniels had last year, that they're going to be able to connect on those types of throws.
He doesn't have the running ability of Jaden Daniels either.
Obviously, Jaden Daniels is a 4.3 athlete. That's not exactly an accomplishable goal, but he's also a 4.5 athlete that is a phenomenal rusher. I think, though, that they need to be very deliberate in getting the ball out quick. And if they can do that and they can accomplish that and they can avoid those 3rd and long situations where Nick Scourton can pin his ears back and just completely go unhinged after Knapp and whoever he's going up against, that's going to be, I think, really, really key for Notre Dame in this game.
One last thing. I know you're going to snark at it. It is what it is. The humidity is going to be 100% on Saturday.
What's the full weather? College Station.
You Northerners be playing. Oh, it's hot.
Oh, it's supposed to rain. It's supposed to rain.
Oh, y'all are fucked.
90 degrees and rain. Well, it's also a night game, too. We got to take that into account.
Thank you. Night game in A&M with humidity and rain. Okay, thank you. If I'm A&M, thank you.
I don't know. I'm not gonna.
If y'all start off 0-1,
I am not a meteorologist. Not a weather analyst.
Swear to God, I'm coming in here and making fun of you. All right, let's get to this last game.
Wait. Who's your pick?
Notre Dame. I already told you. Notre Dame by 3.
Oh, I'm proud of you.
Well, let me say this. I haven't officially put it down on paper. That comes on Wednesday.
Okay.
If you're asking me right now, if you've put a gun to my head and said Blake choose, I'm going to say Notre Dame by 3. I just think they have too much talent at the end. But you know what scares me about this is much more people that are better at betting than I am are taking A&M, and I think that there's got to be something to be said in that. So we'll see. But I mean, clearly, I'm not picking against Mike Denbrock. It's just not. I'm not going to do it.
Okay. Good. I'm proud of you.
Well, I pray to God you pick USC in this next segment. Nevertheless,
I thought about it, but I'm not going to.
Please pick them. Please.
I'm not going to. I'm not an idiot. I'm not going to do it.
No, please. I
hate Lincoln Riley more than I would like to see LSU lose. So.
Showdown in Vegas: LSU versus USC. Brian Kelly, year 3. Lincoln Riley going into year 3. Joe, another game where LSU matches up with an out-of-conference opponent on a Sunday out in Vegas, in Sin City. How do you expect this game going for the Tigers and the Trojans?
You mentioned at the beginning of the show, these teams are eerily similar to one another. You've got 2 teams replacing former Heisman Trophy winners that were consecutively the 1st and 2nd overall picks. You had underwhelming, terrible defenses last year, with new defensive coordinators coming in to completely rework things and reimagine how you're going to play on defense. I lean LSU right now because I think that the deficiencies for USC that are going to show up in this game still, that were problems for them last year, were not just bad scheme by Alex Grinch, but it was no intent to tackle. There was no effort to tackle. It was all just trying to turn the ball over. None of those guys had any technique when it came to breaking down and actually tackling guys. I think that D'Anton Lynn eventually gets these guys right, and they end up being a lot better than everybody anticipates that they can be. But week 1 against an LSU team that's going to have playmakers, multiple good running backs, a quality receiver room, an experienced guy in Garrett Nussmeier who's at least been in situations before as a first-time starter this year. I have to lean with LSU for all those reasons.
I'm not that sold on this than you are. I said last year when they lost in the opener, I'm not doing it. You got to go out there and prove it. Now, Joe, I think the difference is we've had 14 of the 21 days that LSU was out at practice. Brian Kelly gave us the full access. I worry about Garrett Nussmeier turning the ball over, and if you're a USC fan, you should worry about Miller Moss turning the football over if you watch that spring game. I think Brian Kelly put it best today when he said that Blake Baker and D'Anton Lynn are cut from the same cloth. Joe, USC sent 40 different pressures in a spring game. What are they going to do in an actual game? Mm-hmm. The thing that I look at in this matchup that I think that LSU can lean on would be that their offensive line is really good. Now, a lot of people have made a lot about USC and saying last year, their defense stinks, Lincoln stinks, they all stink, whatever. Joe, I've watched too much film of them this past weekend and just in the entire offseason to say that they have some athletes. They got to, if you're LSU, you got to lean on that offensive line and you got to run the football. You got to go old school Brian Kelly, line up, punch somebody in the mouth, and run right at them. I think you do have more athletes than them. I think you have the better staff than them, and I think that you can accomplish that. They have the better staff.
Well, the staff part I don't disagree with. I don't know if I agree with the athletes part though, because I mean,
Harold Perkins. End of story.
Zachariah Branch. I'm not saying end of story with that.
Branch in P4 literally had only I think it was freshman. 1/16 of his catches came from that. Came from there. He did not perform in Power 5 football games last year at all. In the return game, he is. Joe, I'm
just saying they have some silly recruits that they've brought in at receiver, at tight end, at running back. Look, I think that it's an even matchup, but I don't think it's like a guaranteed LSU has better athletes than USC. Okay, fair.
Okay. I just think that you have better athletes than they do. Before I got really interrupted, where USC matches up, I think is what you were hinting at. Their wide receiver room versus LSU's DBs is going to be a big question that going into this game. Can LSU's defensive back room actually do something and have a pulse? I don't know. I've seen them be better through these 14 days. I know that they've been better. They've given Garrett Nussmeier a lot of issues. I worry about Nussmeier and turnovers, but I think, look, he's going to be out there gunslinging and throwing the football around. I have no idea what to make of this game other than that LSU's offensive line, you can lean on and run the football. I think they're going to play a little bit of keep away from USC. I really do. I think they're going to send a whole bunch more heat than they did last year. And, Joe, I think Harold Perkins has shown through this camp and offseason that he's had a really good one. Now it's time for LSU to translate it. I think the same about USC, though, man. I look at that defensive line and that front seven. They're not as bad as people are making them out to be. They're just not. And
they got the tools for D'Anton Lynn to be able to cook up a good game.
Yeah, they have tools. Mm-hmm. And I think that people are vastly underestimating what Lincoln Riley has assembled in the last couple of years. So I just look at that and say if there is one big mismatch, I would say it's LSU's O-line versus in that running game versus USC's defensive line front seven.
The point you bring about how LSU probably going to try to run the ball more, I think is really important. And it goes in line with what we've said about, and I've said about USC going into the season. It's a daunting task for them to be able to, I was reading an article today, though, that they were talking about preparing essentially to be able to match up in the Big Ten. They were telling their guys just to eat. And there were all those videos and those pictures that were put out by the USC strength and conditioning program of all these guys that got ridiculously big. I don't know if that necessarily translates into the first game. It could help them later on in the season against the Big Ten. But I think that LSU with that offensive line is going to try to bully them up front and try to run the ball as much as possible. That is going to lead to success for them. The inverse of this, for USC to win, I think that they do need to generate as many splash plays as possible. You know, they need to connect with the Zachariah Branch over the top. They need to get back to the level of offensive production that we're used to seeing from Lincoln Riley. Not that they were bad last year, but it felt like they were just playing a different type of scheme.
In offense.
Yeah, they absolutely were. They absolutely were one of the best offenses in the country, but it just, they need to stick with what works because you don't have Caleb Williams. You know, Miller Moss needs a little bit of help, a little bit more help than Caleb Williams does.
I'm going to continue to disagree with you on one massive thing here. What is it?
I still don't think that Miller Moss is set up perfectly to be, you know, better than Caleb in this offense.
No, but he's going to play inside the system more. Dude, I've watched more film on them than anything, and you cannot convince me that Caleb Williams played inside the system. You can't convince me of it.
But he doesn't. Miller Moss doesn't have any improvisational skills. You know,
improv doesn't mean shit when you're getting your teeth kicked in, and Notre Dame proved that shit to him last year. Joe, the throws and the shit that he was doing last year was abysmal, and you know it. And you know what else? Here's another thing that I throw your way. Dylan Gabriel at Oregon is a prime example. Stetson Bennett is a prime example of sometimes in college football, when you play inside the system, you will win more football games.
You win more football games, but Heisman Trophy winners over the past 2 years have been two of the best improvisational quarterbacks in the game that we've seen in the past decade or more.
Hold on. Jaden Daniels, yes, would run and improvise to some extent.
He played within the system.
95% of what he did was playing inside the system.
Yes,
you can't use
I know.
In your last segment and say that, well, Denbrock, and then say that he was improvising and he made
No. That's not what I'm not saying that Jaden was purely improvising, but all I'm just trying to point out here is
you're too low on Miller Moss, man. I'm sorry.
You're too high. He played one game against backups. It's absurd.
And you know what? What has Lincoln Riley done with quarterbacks? You hate him so much.
I forget that for a second. Yes, he has produced good quarterback play.
4 Heisman Trophy winners. Why?
Sure. Yes, he has. This is the least talented quarterback he's had.
That we think. And you know what else?
We know.
People said the same exact shit about Baker Mayfield when he was a walk-on.
He ain't Baker Mayfield.
You didn't even know who Baker Mayfield was until Lincoln Riley got there. He was a walk-on. There is something to be said when you look at Lincoln Riley and what he's done with quarterbacks.
I just think that's so arbitrary to just immediately assume Miller Moss is going to be good because
when he's got that many Heisman Trophy winners at
he obviously has success, but I'm not going to go ahead and crown this kid to be good until I see him actually. You had said that he could be better in the system than Caleb Williams was. That is crowning him. Of being a highly successful college quarterback.
You just lost your argument when you said that Caleb Williams likes to improvise and then saying that Miller Moss won't play inside a system more.
I didn't say that. My point wasn't that he likes to improvise. My point was that if shit breaks down, he could improvise and make plays that he needed to. Am I yelling that much? Am I mic that loud?
You always say it's me. You were the one that came in here and started yelling at me. All right.
You started yelling first.
I think that LSU and USC is going to be within a 7-point football game, and I'm just going to lean on LSU's offensive line. Your thought?
Wait, sorry, I got distracted. I got distracted by a comment. What did you say?
I think that this is going to be around a 7-point game.
Mm-hmm.
I give it to LSU, and just the simple nature of that they're going to lean on their running game and their offensive line, and that prevails from them. But I will say this: do not be surprised if Harold Perkins is the talk when we get out of this game.
I think it's a 4-point spread right now. I would take LSU to cover. I think LSU if either team wins, you just said that they could win by a touchdown. That's more than 4 points.
I thought the spread was 6.
No, it was
6.5. 7.
I saw it was 4.
Oh, okay.
Earlier.
Well,
maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think whoever wins by a touchdown.
If LSU loses, it's because Garrett Nussmeier turns the ball over late. He's been known to turn the football over. He's got to play clean football.
Yep.
All right.
It's a great point.
This dude, Michael, bro, you have a caterpillar as your mustache. Go somewhere.
All right.
I'm just serious, dude. He trolls so much.
He's not the only listener that we have that does
but
that.
he's the only one that takes pot shots. Unless you're West Virginia fans who have pube hairs on their chin. All right.
That guy sucks.
Picks on Wednesday, or we have more game previews and picks?
We might have like one more game preview, but we do have game picks.
All right. Joe DeLeone, Blake Ruffino, 2 Italians that scream at one another. You can't get better than that. We'll see you on Wednesday. Y'all have a good one. Peace.